back to Inner Peace for Nerds, and I am your humble host, MacArthur. It occurred to me this morning that since we're going to be discussing philosophy a lot in these videos, it might be a good idea to clarify a few things that can help us get to the good stuff as quickly as possible while avoiding some common misconceptions. And most of these will probably have something to do with a tricky little concept called truth. Now, some of us may recall the words of a famous archaeologist on this topic.
Archaeology is the search for fact, not truth. If it's truth you're interested in, Dr. Tyree's philosophy class is right down the hall.
Wait, what? Oh, I get it. He's doing the old dump your problem students on the philosopher gag. These shovel junkies have been pulling these shenanigans on us for centuries, but Dr. Jones knows perfectly well that philosophy isn't about the search for truth any more than archaeology is. Philosophy is the search for wisdom, and there is a big difference. In fact, most philosophers avoid the word like the plague for a few good reasons. Number one, truth doesn't exist. At least, not in the way the word is typically used. Now, we've all heard the old cliche that truth is a matter of perspective, but this isn't just some empty one-liner your boyfriend drops on you when you find out he's been cheating. If we think this through to its conclusion, we'll soon discover that it's a literal fact of life. And here's why. Because there will always be aspects of our reality that are unknown to us, it would be a pretty bold statement to say that we know the truth about, well, anything. And I'm just not that bold. Unless, of course, I've been hitting the whiskey. But either way, if there is even the smallest part of our universe that is beyond our understanding, then any notions about truth would be incomplete by definition, and...
anyone who says differently is selling something.
But fear not, brave seekers. There may be no such thing as truth, but there is such a thing as true enough, which happens to be good enough for every other life form in the known universe. Which means that it's probably good enough for us. Another reason to steer clear of truth is that it's completely unnecessary. Now you might be thinking, well, obviously, Mac, after all, you can't truly need something that doesn't exist. But one look at history would suggest that most of humanity missed this particular memo. And if so, maybe some hard evidence will get us back on the same page with the rest of nature, which, as we just pointed out, has gotten along just fine without truth for billions of years before we came along and started to muck things up. But maybe it is a little bit more complicated than that. Let's throw out a hypothetical and say for a moment that all these old crusty smart people were wrong and that truth really does exist. Even then, it would still be totally unnecessary for virtually every practical enterprise. Here's what I mean. Like any other game of chance, each decision we make in life is a gamble. Let's use poker once again as a metaphor to illustrate. When a player puts a big bet on the table, they're obviously not saying, "I'm going to win and that's the truth." No, they're simply saying that, according to the evidence observed thus far, I feel that it is likely enough to take a calculated risk. Beyond that, I can't see how truth could do anything other than confuse and overcomplicate an otherwise enjoyable game. Luckily, all that's required to make informed decisions or accomplish goals in the game of life is a bit of detective work, which is the search for evidence, not just fact. Obviously, a good detective uses fact whenever possible, but it usually takes a whole lot more than that to solve a case, simply because we never have all the facts in life. Instead, they must use a combination of logic, deductive reasoning, eyewitness testimony, behavioral analysis, as well as their own instincts, intuitions, and gut feelings to establish a theory that is true enough to risk placing such a large bet on the table, which is to say, arresting a possibly innocent man and all the consequences that may entail. Now, hopefully a detective would never stop halfway through an investigation and announce that he has found the truth, unless of course he's Sherlock Holmes, in which case he gets a pass because he's freaking awesome. But let me rephrase just in case. No real detective with a conscience would behave in this manner because obviously there could be new or undiscovered evidence waiting to appear at any moment, and if we're not paying attention, we could easily miss it. Which brings us to the next reason to be cautious of the truth. Number 3, truth is addictive. Like most good drugs, truth is highly addictive because it feels good. When we decide to make up our minds about a truth, we suddenly feel like we have more control over our lives, like we finally found something solid and reliable to hang on to as we're tossed about on the stormy seas of uncertainty. This creates a natural desire to categorize the world and put it all in neat little boxes and label them, so we can forget about them and move on to the next challenge. It's a sort of defense mechanism, I suppose, but unfortunately, change is a fairly undeniable constant in nearly every aspect of reality. So, even if it existed, truth would naturally be changing with reality. And that would mean that it would begin to rot the moment we put it in a box, which makes our defense mechanism, well, silly. Truth can also be used to make us feel better about ourselves while simultaneously making others feel like shit. And this is a big dose of feel-good for the ego because it means that we know something that someone else doesn't, or at least we think we do. Now, this might make us feel smart or powerful for a brief moment, but in my experience, I just end up feeling like an ass and probably looking like one too whenever I catch myself doing this. So, at this point in my life, at least until further evidence appears, I'm forced to accept the fact that truth is beyond my feeble human intellect for the moment. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, because like all of the best drugs, this one has some pretty nasty side effects. For example, truth will make you go blind. My least favorite side effect of truth is that whenever I think I've found it, I also happen to stop looking for it as an inevitable consequence. It's almost as if I close that part of my mind to the situation and stop looking for new evidence like some lazy, washed-up detective on a crime show, even ignoring it when it's right in front of my face. Until one day, I wake up and find that I'm completely out of touch with reality, having spent months or even years locked inside my castle of intellectual laziness with nothing but a fading sense of security and a trembling geriatric opinion for company. When you are quote-unquote blind in this way, learning new things or seeing from different perspectives becomes almost impossible. As if blindness wasn't enough, we also get a serious learning disability for our trouble, apparently. And all this isn't exactly new information. In fact, philosophers have been discussing this problem for well over 2,000 years, as in Socrates' famous declaration that the only thing that I know is that I know nothing. But it did take centuries before humanity was able to come up with any solutions for this problem. After all, it's not easy by any stretch to find the right balance of conviction and open-mindedness in this crazy world we live in. Eventually, though, philosophers did come to our rescue once again. In the Far East, the development of philosophies like Zen gave us a powerful concept called beginner's mind, which is the practice of approaching every activity in life, no matter how mundane or familiar, as if you have no prior knowledge about the subject, like a child discovering something for the first time. This revolutionary idea would later turn learning into an art form in feudal Japan, when philosophies like Zen were adopted by the samurai, a decision which some scholars believe turned these already famous warriors into the best swordsmen in history. Not to mention some of the most accomplished artists, poets, and philosophers of all time. This principle is so powerful and widely known that it's even expressed by Yoda himself, which to me is a good indication as any of truth, when he says,
"You must unlearn what you have learned."
This is a message that is repeated over and over again in philosophies across the globe. And we're going to talk about them frequently later on in the series because they're just so powerful. But for now, let's get back to talking shit about truth. Reason number 5 that I'm not exactly a fan of this concept is because, on top of all of these other achievements that we've talked about already, truth is the #1 killer of conversations among human beings. That's probably because the only thing it can really do in a conversation is to distract us from other topics, This is no secret, of course, and is used frequently when someone is losing an argument, for example, or if they are presenting an illogical hypothesis. This is known as a fallacy, an attempt to distract others from the issue at hand. As we mentioned earlier, that's why many philosophers have a common understanding that whenever we use the word true, what we're really saying is true enough, meaning that whenever likelihood reaches an astronomical level, it's probably safe to say that it's true enough, at least for the sake of communication and decision-making. Otherwise, we end up getting stuck in circular arguments and philosophical debates about even the simplest of topics. Clearly, this doesn't do anyone any good. Which brings us to the final and the most heinous of crimes committed by the vile criminal known as truth. Number 6, truth hurts. And I don't mean this in the cliched sense that most people do when they use that phrase. What I mean is, if you look closely enough, you will find truth at the root of every human conflict in the civilized world, from an argument with your spouse to an all-out war between nations. You see, most animals in nature fight about territory, resources, breeding rights, or whatnot, and humans are no exception, but we are the only ones who fight over truth, which, hilariously enough, is the only one of the above assets that has no real value. We argue about it, brag about it, and even kill each other over it. Which is pretty embarrassing for the most advanced species on the planet, considering the fact that even one-celled organisms have enough sense to avoid killing each other unnecessarily. You know, it's funny, I had like 10 other points to make as to why we should be cautious of the truth, but after that last bit, I think that's reason enough for me to leave this weird fucker alone, man. So, in conclusion, why did I go off on this epic crusade, and more importantly, why did I drag you all along with me, tied unceremoniously several yards behind my horse? Because it might be easier to absorb the wisdom that we're going to discuss in this series if you understand that I have nothing to sell you. I'm not here to try and convince you of anything, or to get you to believe in anything whatsoever outside of your own personal experience. You can be reasonably assured of this because most of the ideas we're going to discuss were written down thousands of years before I was even born. So neither myself or the dead people who wrote them down will get too offended if you decide that they don't work for you. But according to the most objective observations that I can muster, I'm willing to bet my time and energy that at least one of you will find something useful herein. So, this is all great in theory, but the desire for truth is a tough habit to break. We each have a lifetime of beliefs and assumptions about reality. Those are called opinions. But just because you have a phaser pistol doesn't mean you have to use it on your friends. When it comes to our goal of less suffering and more joy for ourselves and for those around us, our only real concern is behavior. That is to say, all we really need to know in life is which thoughts and actions are most likely to produce positive results across time. This is the very definition of doing your best, and nothing more could be asked or expected of you. It requires no truth, opinions, or certainty whatsoever. In fact, it requires very little thought most of the time. All it requires is observation, reason, and the desire to apply them in our own lives. Whatever happens after that is not our problem anymore, whether we're willing to admit it or not. So, now that the disclaimers are out of the way, maybe Dr. Jones and I can find some common ground. From a metaphorical perspective, perhaps philosophy is the search for truth after all, but we certainly don't dig it up once we think we've found it. For that, we send in the shovel junkies, of course. See what I did there, Indy? Tag, you're it. And that's it for me today, family. If you're enjoying this content, please remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And if you have thoughts on this or any of the other topics that we cover in this series, don't be a wisdom hog. Let us know in the comments section below, or join the conversation live. Until next time, may your journey towards truth be forever free of destinations.